Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lowe's Philadelphia. Please make your way to your seats and be seated at this time. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please find your table and make your way to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, as you walk through the room, please find your tables and your seats at this time. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please make your way through the room here and find your seats and be seated at this time. Please avoid crowding the doorway so we can get everyone in the room. Thank you.
I went back to DJ mode, sorry. Somebody's opened the drink. Is that what you're seeing? No. Oh, son of a bitch. Yeah. Work on it. You're seeing that. Keep kissing. Seeing the preview monitor?
Oh, yeah.
Program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats at this time. The program will begin shortly. Please find your seats at this time. Thank you.
Unmute.
Once again, please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Program will begin shortly. Please take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in 3 minutes. Please take your seats at this time.
Yeah, much better. Much better. Love you.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, it's very important we get everyone seated in the next 2 minutes so we can begin the program. Please take your seats at this time. Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats. The program will be beginning in the next minute. Please Please take your seats at this time. Thank you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we ask you please make your way into the room if you haven't already done so. Please find your table and take your seat. The program will begin shortly. Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lowe's Philadelphia. We ask one last time if you could please take your seats. The program will begin momentarily. The Committee of 70's 111th Anniversary Luncheon is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please take a moment to silence all technology before our program begins. The Pennsylvania Cable Network is taping today's program for television broadcast. The Committee of 70 would like to publicly thank the following sponsors for their support. Visionary sponsors: Comcast Corporation, Independence Blue Cross, PwC, TD Bank, University City Science Center, Wells Fargo. Champion sponsors: FMC, Leslie Ann Miller, LLC, Morgan Lewis and Bacchius, LLP, Pepper Hamilton, the Philadelphia Phillies. Advocate sponsors: AmeriHealth Caritas, Aramark Corporation, Cozen O'Connor, Day and Zimmerman, Drexel University, Ernst & Young, LLP, Glenn Mead, KPMG, LLP, Navigant, Nelson, Newmark, Grubb, Knight, Frank, Schneider, Harrison, Siegel, and Lewis, Thomas Jefferson University Hospitals. A complete list of our citizen-level sponsors can be found in your program books. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Stephen S. Tang, CEO of the University City Science Center and chairperson of the Committee of 70 Board of Directors.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Steve Tang, and for the past year, I've had the honor and privilege to be the chairperson of the board of the Committee of 70. And I'm delighted in that role to welcome you here to 70's annual luncheon. I want to thank all the sponsors that you just heard mentioned, and all 57 of them listed in your program book. The Committee of 70 has been an effective, nonpartisan advocate for better government and politics in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania for more than 111 years. Now, when you turn 111, it can be difficult to make sweeping statements about what you did or didn't do in the past. And even at that age, it's a little hard to remember the recent past. And Philadelphia being Philadelphia, I'm certain that if I said this is the first time in our history that we've sold out our annual event, someone would emerge from the shadows with a yellow newspaper clipping, proving in fact that we had sold out the event in 1927 or so. So I'll make a more cautious claim that this is the first time in recent memory that we've sold out our annual event. So thank you all for voting on your feet and joining us here today. A few key people deserve special thanks for their efforts in making today's luncheon a success. Notably, our event committee co-chairs, Mike Carbone from TD Bank, Chris Cavalieri from Thomas Jefferson University, Tad Decker of Cozen O'Connor, Leslie Ann Miller, Esquire of Leslie Ann Miller, LLC, Mike Stiles of the Philadelphia Phillies, and the entire board of directors of the Committee of 70 who pulled this out to create this sellout. I'd like to ask our entire board of directors to stand and be recognized. Thank you. And in case you're wondering, there aren't 70 of them, but it's pretty close. I'd like to also share sincere thanks with Jerry Sweeney and Brandywine Realty Trust for serving as our presenting sponsor here today. As far as we know, we've never had a presenting sponsor before, and the support is a testament to Jerry's and Brandywine's remarkable civic leadership. Many of you are aware of Jerry's efforts to lead the Philadelphia Growth Coalition as it advocates for wage tax reform that will accelerate job growth in the city. Please join me in thanking once again Jerry Sweeney, Brandywine Realty Trust, and the members of the Philadelphia Growth Coalition, many of whom are in attendance today. Thank you. We are very fortunate to have with us today, very soon, Mayor Michael Nutter, our great current mayor, as well as Mayor-elect Jim Kenney, whom we're confident will be our next great mayor. I'd like to thank these two outstanding alums from St. Joe's Prep for being here today. In addition, thanks go out as well to the many elected officials from our city, our state, our federal delegations who made time out of their busy schedules to join us. There are literally too many of you to name individually, but I want you to know that we appreciate your presence and honor and thank you for your public leadership. I also want to thank those of you who are here today that knew little or nothing about the Committee of 70 before you arrived today. I was one of you 6 years ago. In 2009, I bought a ticket to the 70 annual event to hear Vice President Joe Biden speak. I was seated at one of the tables way in the back rows with a first-term member of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. I remember thinking, he looked awfully young to be an elected official. That guy seated next to me was Brennan Boyle, who is today a United States Congressman. What a great city of opportunity Philadelphia is. So for you folks sitting in the back rows, I expect to see one of you on stage chairing a 70 event and at least one of you in Congress in the next 6 years or so. Is it a deal? Any takers from the back? And so in all sincerity, I do hope those of you here today will seize the opportunity to learn more about 70 and join our cause to make Philadelphia great for our citizens of today and tomorrow. I really do feel fortunate to chair 70 at a time of great promise and opportunity. We have a strong leader in President and CEO David Thornburg and a small but mighty team on the playing field of good government advocacy. I can't help noticing how uniquely American it is that David and I are here working together. As many of you know, David Thornburg is the son of a Pennsylvania governor and the United States Attorney General. In contrast, I am the son of Chinese immigrants who fled communist China in the 1940s to build a better life here in the United States. It certainly is a remarkable country for opportunity, isn't it? David will have a few words to say later in the program, but I'll say for now is that 70 is headed in a new and ingenious direction that began under my predecessor, chairperson, the effervescent Mike Carbone. As an organization, we're not just your grandmother or grandfather's election watchdog anymore. 70 is looking forward to making good things happen during and between elections, to encourage new candidates to get on the ballot and to better engage all Philadelphians in the process of electing and governing this great city. And I have to say, it's a great compliment to my day job leading the University City Science Center, where I work with impatient, innovative entrepreneurs who are eager to invent the future with new technology. Albert Einstein once said that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And that's why we need innovation infused into our world in government and politics as much as it is in science and business. Now it's my great pleasure to present a very special award to Mayor Michael A. Nutter. As many of you know, Mayor Nutter came into office in 2007 on the heels of a depressing and dispiriting series of pay-to-play scandals that ultimately resulted in 27 convictions and guilty pleas of city officials and political contributors. At the time, one reporter noted that the pay-for-play game, as practiced in Philadelphia these days, is without equal among major cities across the country in its scope and brazenness. Another observer was more direct. If you come to Philadelphia to do business, beware. The process is so convoluted and expensive that only somebody who has invested politically already is going to want to enter the game. As a member of City Council, where he sat shoulder to shoulder with Jim Kenney, I might add, Michael Nutter was instrumental in securing the passage of campaign finance limits and ethics reforms that effectively severed the ties and the links between contributions and contracts. As mayor, he set the tone from the top that members of the administration would meet the highest standard of integrity and ethical behavior. No decision exemplified his resolve more than his hiring of Amy Curlin and Joan Markman, two widely respected and effective former prosecutors, as the city's Inspector General and first Chief Integrity Officer, respectively. Sadly, as many of you know, Joan Markman passed away in January after a remarkable career of public service. Through his leadership, Mayor Nutter has also demonstrated that he understands that the first and most important legacy of a great leader is to shape and define the culture of his or her organization. At the time when Philadelphia needed it desperately, Michael Nutter stepped forward to make a very clear what was and wasn't acceptable. And he expected the highest standards of behavior, and he was ready to bring the full weight of his office to bear against those who crossed the line. For that reason, the Committee of 70, long the standard bearer of ethics and integrity in public leadership, is proud to honor Michael A. Nutter as the inaugural Joan Markman Champion of Ethics and Integrity in Government. And in doing so, we're pleased to recognize and applaud the mayor's own efforts to create the Inspector General's Joan Markman Award for Integrity, an annual award recognizing city employees who support the Inspector General's mission of upholding the public trust with the highest standards of ethics and integrity by rooting out fraud, corruption, and misconduct. It's right and fitting that we honor Joan's contributions with these two complimentary awards, even as we continue to mourn her loss. In that regard, we're pleased to be joined today by members of Joan's family. I'd like to recognize them and thank you for their presence. Joan's husband, Jim Becker, her daughter, Lizzie Becker, a senior at Germantown Friends, her brother, Scott Markman, who traveled from Chicago to be with us today, and Marianne and Tom Blocker, her sister and brother-in-law. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the Committee of 70 and the 1.5 million citizens of Philadelphia, it's my distinct pleasure to honor Mayor Michael A. Nutter as the inaugural Joan Markman Champion of Ethics and Integrity in Government. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Michael A. Nutter.
Good afternoon. Steve, thank you very, very much. It is an incredible honor, and still with a very heavy heart to. I just wish we were in a position to have named an award after Joan, because it just would have been fitting. But to have her here with us. And it would have been my hope that had she lived, we would still have a Joan Markman Award through the Committee of 70 because of her work. But naturally, we don't always get our wishes, but we should still have them. I miss her greatly. Dr. Steve Tang, our great chair of the board, and all of the board members, thank you very, very much, and especially to board member Leslie Ann Miller, who was very helpful in this process. David Thornburg, thank you for your continued leadership in a variety of ways and levels in our city, and certainly as the CEO of the Committee of 70. Brandywine Realty Trust and Jerry, thank you very, very much as well. Certainly want to recognize all of the elected officials who are here, but one in particular. Can we please recognize the next mayor of the city of Philadelphia, Jim Kenney. He and I have known each other for a long, long period of time, and my commitment to him, both privately and publicly, is that we will do everything possible to have the smoothest mayoral transition in modern history. And our teams have been working together for months. And we started that process actually even before the general election with him and with his Republican opponent, just to keep everybody, as Joan would have us, on the straight and narrow. So everyone got the same information at the same time. Inspector General Amy Curlin, Chief Integrity Officer Stephanie Tipton. Certainly always a great, great pleasure to have her back in town with her proud mom at the other table. But ladies and gentlemen, please recognize one of the great, great television anchors in the United States of America, but born and raised right here in Philadelphia, Kristen Welker. Most of the time I see Kristen actually in DC, although I did tease her once on occasion when she was telling me about how tough it is to cover the president, and then I saw her on television with the backdrop of the Hawaii waters in the background. And the next I saw her, I said, oh, that's really, really tough duty, covering the president, going with him to Hawaii. I'm on a little bit of a campaign, no disrespect to the gentleman in the current seat, but there'll come a point in time when there'll be another transition for the nightly news. And my candidate to be the anchor for the 6:30 nightly news is Kristen Welker. It never hurts to start campaigning early. Mark HALPERIN and John HEILEMANN, co-managing editors, Bloomberg Politics. I know you're going to be on a panel later today, but thank you for being here in Philadelphia. And as Steve mentioned, certainly to have Joan's family here, and we've talked from time to time and try to stay in touch, but Jim Becker, your strength and courage through the many, many, many tough days, the ones I knew about, and I'm sure the many that I didn't know about, has helped to sustain many of us who had the opportunity to work with Joan either on the federal side or on the city side. And I've never seen someone handle personal circumstance and tragedy the way you did, and you made it a whole lot easier for the rest of us. Please recognize Jim Becker, Joan's husband. Lizzie and Andrew. Andrew, again, you know, it's so challenging for our children these days. Andrew in school and in Spain right now. It's just, I look forward to reliving some of our children's lives and the things that they get to do. I spent my third year. Oh, I spent my third year right here in Philadelphia. Yeah, that's where I was. And to Lizzie, off to college soon, wherever you decide. I know so much about both of you. Your mom loved you both dearly, but she would talk about you, and I'd hear about all the trials and tribulations of teenage years as we would commiserate about our children, but she loved you so much nonetheless. Scott, Joan's brother, and Marianne and Tom, and all of the family, thank you for being here. It really is an incredible honor and a validation of the work of the government, not just me, to be the recipient of this first award in Joan's name. She's a tremendous public servant. She was, and continues to inspire in all of us a deep commitment to be effective, to be efficient, and to run an honest government. Her zeal for the work was only second to her commitment to her family, that she loved and talked about all the time. From her work as a federal prosecutor, her time as an assistant district attorney, and her tenure as the city's first chief integrity officer, Joan's moral compass never, ever failed her. Her judgment, her passion, and her wisdom greatly benefited me, personally and professionally, and our entire administration and the city of Philadelphia. And I was very, very lucky to have known her and to have counted her among my friends. I only knew Joan initially through the newspapers, and one of the most damaging recent cases of a variety of public corruption matters in the city of Philadelphia. And I got lucky, to be honest. So I did not know Joan, and I did not know Amy personally. I knew her father, who had been a city solicitor. Fortunately for me, both of them were retiring from the federal government at the same time. And I interviewed both of them on the same day. And I wasn't sure, quite honestly, which one would be in which position. But meeting them and talking with them both, I easily figured out at least one thing. I wasn't going to take just one. I wanted both, and offered both positions in our city government, and you know what positions they were in, and then we were off to the races. And so it seems right, of course, that there would be two awards in Joan's legacy. This one, and the City of Philadelphia's Joan Markman Award for Integrity, which was previously named the Inspector General's Integrity Award, which is presented to a person who demonstrates a strong commitment to integrity, diligence, and transparency on behalf of all the citizens and employees of the City of Philadelphia. I'm looking forward to announcing the winner of that award next month. As Steve Tang mentioned, when I ran for mayor, I said that I wanted Philadelphians to have faith and trust in their local government again. I wanted to repair the damage done in City Hall and many other corridors of our government. And I wanted to restore the reputation of our many great public employees after years and years of stories and articles and arrests and indictments out of a pay-to-play culture that was completely out of control, in my opinion. And reform often makes candidates unpopular, but this particular message of transparency and ethical government resonated with many Philadelphians. From my earliest days in government, I have been committed to trying to govern Philadelphia, whether as a council member or now as mayor, in that effective, efficient, and transparent way with integrity and honesty. Those have to be the core tenets of any government. Early in 2008, I think on the first or second day, I signed an executive order officially creating the Chief Integrity Officer position and then appointed Joan to that post. And that position's role is to uphold the public's trust by ensuring that the city operates with fairness and integrity, uncompromised by conflicts of interest, political affiliation, favoritism, or other unfair considerations, unquote. I gave the Chief Integrity Officer the office literally right next to mine. And I wanted Joan to have access and influence, helping to guide our administration and to hold all of us, including me, accountable. In working with Joan and our team, we strengthened the city's policies concerning gifts to public employees, dealt with issues of nepotism, outside employment, and sexual harassment, investigated and resolved charges of unethical contracting practices, launched the Integrity Works website, which helps city employees understand and navigate our city's ethics rules in a variety of scenarios. We supported several city working groups, task forces, and initiatives, including our open data process. And in partnership with the Office of Inspector General, established a control and compliance program for the city's receipt and spending of Federal Recovery Act grants to ensure that the city was always in compliance, which we were. We continue to make ethics and integrity a priority, and I am very, very proud, as I watched during the course of the campaign, that Mayor-elect Kenny upholds those same standards himself. Please recognize the Mayor-elect one more time. So, Joan and Amy, kind of a dynamic duo, they were the generals in the fight to make Philadelphia city government a more ethical one, and our employees are the great soldiers in that fight. In short, this award does celebrate certainly the administration's commitment to ethics, integrity, and transparency, but it really is the city's award. It's all of our public employees' award. I'll accept it on their behalf because they're the ones that are out there each and every day trying to uphold the same standards that Joan insisted for all of us. Two last personal comments. I've long admired and had the opportunity and the benefit of the work of the Committee of 70 for many years. During my time in City Council, I used your work in the past to fight for, at the time, new voting machines, which were new, back in 2002 when they finally came to us. They're experiencing a little bit of wear and tear, and I think we probably need some new ones. But it was your work on a voting scandal back at that time in the 90s that caused me as a member of City Council to fight for new voting machines, new electronic voting machines that make it very difficult for anyone to cheat. It was your work, the Committee of 70, that also helped propel me to work on creating the Police Advisory Commission. Again, great work. I want to encourage the Committee of 70 to continue to do that kind of work, to push our city government, to push our employees, to push our citizens, to continue to uphold those kinds of standards. But most importantly, in the future, I'll have a little more free time next year, I'd also like us to seriously try to figure out how we engage in a real campaign about citizenship and the responsibility of voting in the first place. It is a right, but it is a right that we cannot take for granted. It's a right that many others have suffered. Some have died. We don't have the luxury of not voting. And there are many, many questions about why that's occurring, and it's not just in Philadelphia. but it's across the United States of America, but it's saying something about the state of democracy in our country, and we do need to try to figure this out. There's no better organization to work on this issue than the Committee of 70. Philadelphians, Pennsylvanians, Americans need to vote. They need to go to the polling place. And we desecrate the memory of people like Martin Luther King or John Lewis and so many, many others, Ambassador Andrew Young, and people here in Philadelphia and across the country, if we don't take advantage of that opportunity. Folks did march 54 miles for the right to vote. All of us should be able to walk 5 minutes from our house to go to a polling place. No one's going to ask about a poll tax. No one's going to ask you how many bubbles in a bar of soap. No one's going to ask you to count the number of marbles in a big jug. All you have to do is show up, push a few buttons, express yourself, and then you have participated in our democracy. But voting, of course, is not the end of it, and tweeting is not either. And I tweet well, maybe not as much as some other people, but I do nonetheless. But that's not the most active part of citizenship. Being an active voter, being engaged with the elected officials, being active in your community. That's what participation is all about. And we should not have to offer a reward for people to go to a polling place on Election Day. We should not have to offer a reward for people to go to vote on Election Day. Participation and having your voice heard and changing policy should be reward enough in this democracy here in the United States of America. So, thank you again. It impacts me deeply. It is a validation for the work and the effort and the commitment that we made a long, long time ago. And I could not be more pleased or touched to have an award in the name of our friend, Joan Markman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Nutter. It's now my pleasure to introduce our Mayor-elect, Jim Kenney. Certainly much has been written and will be written about Jim Kenney in his march to victory last Tuesday, so my introduction this time will be brief. I would only say that I've been impressed in the course of his campaign and with his spirit of diversity and inclusion, his commitment to ethical leadership, and his ability to reach out across the city to marshal the energies and talents of a wide range of Philadelphians, new and old alike. Mayor-elect Kenney, you made it clear that we're all in this together, and we all have something to contribute to the future of Philadelphia. We look forward to your leadership and extend our help to you to help build the future of our great city. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Mayor-elect Jim Kenney.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it. And I am humbled to be here in this room with all of you. All the people in this room have the ability and have had the ability and continue to do every day to change the lives of people in our region and in our city. And I want to make sure that you understand my commitment to you, which is cooperating with you in the things that you need from a business perspective or from a Committee of 70's perspective. We are in this together. And when I was on the campaign trail, people would ask me inevitably, what are you going to do about a certain subject? And I would say to them, stop, what are we going to do? Because this is about all of us. It's not about one person, not one mayor, not me, not Mayor Nutter. It's about us as a group. And I'd like to thank Dr. Tang and also a number of other members of my transition team, which are members of the board of the Committee of 70, including Mike Nadel, Judy Von Selnick, and Joyce Wilkerson. And also another transition team member, Jerry Sweeney, and thank you for being the presenting sponsor of this event. I always love working with you and look forward to the great ideas and vision that you have going forward for our city. And I want to thank the Committee of 70. Sometimes they can be a pain, which is a good thing. It's good pain, because they bring to your attention when you're going a little off course, and it's the same thing that our integrity officer has done and that our Inspector General has done. They have to continue to remind us to stay on the straight, stay on the narrow, and do the right thing all the time. And I was proud to work with Mayor Nutter when he was a council member in the construction of the Board of Ethics, of campaign finance reform. And I will tell you, the first election that I went under on campaign finance reform was not easy. The Board of Ethics had a machine gun request for information after information, and our staff would go crazy trying to fulfill those requests. But in the end, it really did work. And in the end, the campaign limits really did make a difference, because no one can write you a $50,000 check anymore. No one can write you a $100,000 check anymore. Everyone is within a limit, so everyone's treated equally. Sadly, we need money to run campaigns. They're expensive. But when people can't give you exorbitant amounts of money, it does improve the process. And I want to thank Mayor Nutter for his work in that effort. I also want to thank Mayor Nutter for all the things he's done relative to transparency and integrity in government. And I want to assure you all in this room and all within this sound of my voice and in the newspapers, we are not going backwards. We are going to go forward and build on the things that the Nutter administration has done in transparency, ethics, and integrity in government. And I don't think it's any secret, but I will reiterate, after I was nominated in May, the first call I made was to Amy Kurland. I asked her if she would consider staying on with us and keeping her great team of investigators together and helping us save taxpayers' money to put into things like schools and other services. I mean, there was about $40+ million and growing in the amount of money that they saved in waste, fraud, and abuse that went back into the city coffers to pay for real services. So I want to thank her team, her terrific team of ex-FBI agents and other investigators who have done just a terrific job. And she will be back if I think she's willing, but she'll be back working in the next administration. And I just want to say finally that I look forward to continuing the work of Mayor Nutter and his administration, but I also look forward to changing the narrative when it comes to poverty in our city, whether it's education, incarceration, opportunities for jobs for people to make a living wage and raise a family. The people in this room, along with the government working arm in arm, can make that happen, can change that narrative, and move that poverty needle down. And that is my goal. Our goal over the next 4 years is to move that poverty needle in the downward direction and making lives better for our people living in every neighborhood in the city, because in this city, your zip code shouldn't matter regarding your opportunity to meet your potential in life. So I thank you for having me here today, and I thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Jim. Now I invite you all to enjoy your lunch. In the spirit of the election season in our program today, I encourage you to participate in our flash poll of presidential candidates using your smartphone. I think we have the chance here to upstage the Iowa caucuses. And if I may say so, with all due respect to the citizens of Iowa, that would be a big step forward in good government for our nation. Directions to vote are at your place settings, and we look forward to following the returns throughout the lunch as a prelude to what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion of the presidential campaign season with Mark Halperin, John Heilemann, and Kristen Welker. Thank you all for your presence and your support for this great organization. Enjoy your lunch.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage David B. Thornburg, CEO of Committee of 70.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of our great board and our great chair, I want to add my welcome to all of you for being here. This is a tremendous show of support, and this is my first lap around the track on these events, and it's just very heartening to see so much support in this terrific community. So, some of you know that on weekends I play in a couple of rock bands. Maybe you didn't know that. And one of my bandmates is actually here today, my wonderful wife, Rebecca, who's a singer with me. And on that note, the musical note that is, I'm thrilled to be able to open for our rock star journalists, HALPERIN, HEILEMANN, and Welker, which admittedly doesn't quite roll off the tongue like Emerson, Lake, and Palmer, or Medeski, Martin, and Wood, but we are in for a great treat. Before I give them the big Philadelphia introduction, like any good opening act, I want to leave you with a few choice selections from my band, the Committee of 70, that is, which, come to think of it, does sound a little bit like a psychedelic rock band from way back. Any besides me remember the Association or the 13th Floor Elevators? A quick word about 70, as our fans call us. We have a small but mighty staff, and they work hard and they work well, and today is a testament to their efforts. In particular, I want to recognize and thank Aileen Kane, who's been holding down the floor on this great event, and Dan Bright, who's also burnt more than a little midnight oil recently. Please join me in thanking them today. Okay, so what tune is the Committee of 70 playing these days? What are 70's greatest hits? Certainly not some warmed-over K-Tel collection of previously released tracks remixed in fake stereo. In fact, we're improvising around a familiar theme of reform. We're writing new melodies to an old tune. Way back in 1904, even before the internet, 70 was founded around three big goals. First, to protect and improve the voting process. Second, to encourage people of integrity and promise to run for office and get involved in government, and to support them when they get there with a flow of ideas and promising practices. And finally, to inform and engage the public in the critical issues of the day. These three challenges are as important, probably more important than ever before. I would refer you to a piece that WURD and WHYY reporter Solomon Jones wrote the other day that asked aloud whether Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, was rapidly becoming the crypt of democracy. So, how will we reinterpret our founding themes for 2015 and beyond? For those longtime 70 fans, let me assure you that when it's called for, we will continue to remind our public officials, publicly and forcefully, that we elect them to do a job, to use government to improve our lives, to make ideas matter. We expect men and women in public office to be there to do something, and not just to be somebody. But beyond that, we're developing a pretty ambitious set list. We're looking to engage and educate more folks, particularly promising young leaders, in what it takes to run for public office. We've already begun working with the soon-to-be Kennedy administration to bring cutting-edge ideas and practices into the new administration. With our chair's help, we'll be looking for ways to engage innovators and entrepreneurs outside of government with innovators on the inside to make government work better for all of us. We'll continue to work with our Silicon Valley partners at CrowdPack to bring leading-edge voter engagement tools to Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. We'll advocate for new approaches to voting to make sure that every voter and every vote counts, and for structural changes to government that bring us closer to the 21st century. But For the closing track on today's playlist, let me say a word about how we'll work, not just what we'll do, but how we'll do it. You may have seen the news that after he was elected, Justin Trudeau, the newly minted Canadian Prime Minister, assembled the most diverse cabinet in Canada's history. His response, when asked why, simply that this is 2015. We couldn't agree more. Governing this city fairly and well, as our mayor-elect reminds us so passionately, demands that we build diverse coalitions of people and interests if we're going to get things done and done right. And now, for our main act. Unless you've been hiding in a cave in Fairmount Park, you probably know these three things. First, that we're less than a year away from a presidential election. Two, that Philadelphia will host the Democratic National Convention in 2016. And three, that Donald Trump is in fact a leading candidate for the Republican nomination. Who better to help us figure out the what, so what, and now what of this political season than our rock star panelists? I'll give each a very brief introduction, but also refer you to their more extensive bios in the program book. Our moderator, hometown hero, Kristen Welker, is a Philadelphia native, a graduate of Germantown Friends and Harvard University, and is now covering the White House and the presidential campaign for NBC News. Welcome to you and your mother today, Kristen. Mark Halperin and John Heilemann, also Harvard graduates, I might add, and then I'll ask, what exactly are these three Harvard grads doing wandering around in Quaker territory? John and Mark are the dynamic duo of this generation of political journalists. It's hard to turn to any media stream without John and Mark weighing in to deliver their superb insights on the political process and the emerging presidential race. And I know there are more than a few political junkies in this room who have read either or both Game Change and Double Down, their definitive must-read accounts of the 2008 and 2012 presidential elections. Please join me in a big Philadelphia welcome for Kristen Welker, Mark Halperin, and John Heilemann.
Thank you so much, David, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to the Committee of 70 for having us here. This is such an incredible honor to be moderating this great event in my hometown. I want to thank my mom for being here as well today, and Mayor Nutter for starting the campaign early. And I also just want you all to recognize someone else who's here, Chris Blackman, who was my news director at NBC 10, who gave me a job here at NBC 10, supported all of my dreams, and is really the reason that I'm at the White House today and sitting here before you. So thank you to all of you. And thanks to you for being in my hometown. So let's start off with the Democratic National Convention. Everyone here is so excited about it. The first time the Democrats are going to hold their convention in Philadelphia since 1948, and the first time that there will be a major convention in Philadelphia since 2000, when the Republicans held their convention here. DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz has projected that in any given convention could inject about $150 to $200 million into a local economy. So what does this mean for this city economically, but also politically? And Mark, you can start.
Okay, well first, great to be here. Really honored to be here with Kristen, just called a hometown hero, but my sense from talking to people is she's part of the big three: Mike Schmidt, Dr. J, Kristen Welker. So honored to be here, and I'm headed to Iowa later tonight, and Dr. Tang, I will send your greetings to the people of Iowa, because I can see you're a big fan of the caucus process. I noticed the last round of results showed 8 times more people thought Bernie Sanders would be the next president than Ted Cruz, so I'll tell the people of Iowa, you guys are ahead of them. Little bit daunting to speak about Pennsylvania and Philadelphia politics in front of a room like this. To paraphrase a great John F. Kennedy line, there's more political sophistication gathered here today, with the possible exception of when Ed Rendell dines alone. Governor Rendell told me to say that. Did that? He said it would go over really well. You know, there's been a lot of academic research and journalistic work on this question of whether conventions bring a lot of economic activity. I remember well the convention when President Bush was nominated here, and the logistics of the time were pretty stark. There was a lot of security. It was hard to get around. And when you've seen cities do that, and you've seen cities announce road closures and urge people who live here to get out of town, it does send a message to the visiting journalists and the visiting political people that maybe going to restaurants is too difficult or shopping is too difficult. So I'd urge you, for your own sakes and the sakes of the people who are coming to visit, to think through the plan. So you got to have security, obviously, particularly in a post 9/11 world, and you have to find a way to move people efficiently. But it's important to make it clear to everybody who's visiting that businesses are open and you can get stuff done. And then, again, as academics and others have evaluated the impact, you know, 4-day convention, 3-day convention, whatever it ends up being, I think clearly part of the way the impact is greater is if you have stuff on the front end and stuff on the back end. This is not a city that needs to be introduced to the country, since it's been part of the country, an integral part of the country from the beginning. But I do think that the cities that seem to have done better are the ones that, again, find a way to stay open for business and also try to make the moment in the sun last longer than just the duration of the convention. And I think those estimates are a little bit inflated, but there's clearly a lot of economic activity. And John and I will be bringing our corporate Amex cards with us. So we'll do our part.
I was going to say we could account for about $100 million in economic development here on our own.
John, what do you think the impact is? And politically, what is the significance for Democrats of holding it here in Philadelphia?
Well, one of the things that the Obama campaign, and again, like Mark, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you all for having us and being so nice about us. We always like coming here, but it's especially nice to be here with you, Kristen, because we can bask in your reflected glory. We don't get that opportunity nearly often enough. I think one of the things the Obama campaign made in so many ways was an innovator in terms of using conventions, first their convention in Denver in 2008 and then in Charlotte in 2012, as opportunities to do real work. Not merely to do a television show for the country, but to go out and register a lot of voters and to do a lot of outreach and do a lot of organizing. Now, it's the case that the North Carolina strategy, of which the Charlotte Convention was part, did not end up meaning that Barack Obama won that state. It was one of the only swing state that he ended up losing. On the other hand, I think if you talk to David Plouffe and some other people in that campaign, they would say that he would not have come anywhere near as close to winning North Carolina as he did, given the prevailing winds in that state, had it not been for the good work they did in those days in Charlotte. And one of the things that we know about this Clinton campaign is that both in terms of its attitude and in terms of the people who work there, they have taken a lot of lessons from the Obama campaign, and data-centric and using all campaign opportunities as organizing opportunities and being very data-centric are two of the things that are very different about Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016 than it was in 2008. And I imagine that their campaign, though I've not discussed it with them, it would be shocking to me if they were not going to try to follow the Obama model and come here and try to use this city to make sure. We know that the state has become pretty reliably Democratic in the course of a lot of presidential elections, the last 6, I believe, in a row. But I think they will make a very strong effort to make sure that they button this state up in the course of the 4 or 5 days that they're here in July. Well,
you bring me to my next point, which is that Secretary Clinton, obviously very popular in this region. She won this state in 2008. She beat then Senator Obama by about 10 points. Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania, I should say, was a swing state when I was growing up, but it's really become a state that we think of as leaning blue. Having said that, the Democrats are not going to take it for granted. Which Republicans do you think might resonate here? And can Republicans win this state in 2016? How would they do it? Mark, you can go ahead.
It'd be difficult to do. Cycle to cycle, a party that's lost a state in the previous cycle, you got to look at the math of how much ground can you make up. And this has become not just a reliably blue state on the presidential level, but pretty solidly blue. You know, the Clintons have done well in Pennsylvania, both in primaries and obviously in the general election. You know, one of their top political advisors, James Carville, once said about Pennsylvania, it's Pittsburgh on one end, Philadelphia on the other, and Alabama in the middle. And he didn't mean that in a nice way, I don't think. But obviously a Republican victory here, and they have won statewide and for other offices not that long ago, involves doing well in the center of the state, doing well in the suburbs of the two big cities, and holding down the margins as best they can in the cities. Whoever the Republicans nominate, and if you look at somebody like John Kasich, maybe biographically, and having been born in Pennsylvania and having been elected governor of Pennsylvania twice and being reelected with a quarter of the African-American vote, according to the exit, Ohio, or the quarter of the African-American vote, you'd say he might have the best chance. Yeah. But even Governor Kasich would have to deal with the fact that the state's demography has changed, and the Republican Party, after Governor Romney lost, had a very high priority appealing to the so-called coalition of the ascendant, younger voters, African-American voters, Hispanics, Asians, gay and lesbian voters, women, particularly younger single women. And despite that rhetorical commitment, they've done virtually nothing of any significance since the election where Governor Romney lost to make progress with any of those groups. And in fact, I think you could argue pretty easily they've gone backwards in some sense. And so, you know, could a Republican do well in the suburbs of this city? Maybe. This is, you know, the person who's now being touted as the avatar of the future of the Republican Party and who won the poll here pretty commandingly on who's going to be the Republican nominee, Marco Rubio, has in the context of this campaign come out in opposition to abortion rights in the case of rape and incest. That's a position that's supported by about 10% of the American people, and I suspect the number of women in the Philadelphia suburbs who support that position would be lower than 10%. So it's going to be a challenge to put this state in play. The last thing I'll say is the Republicans to win need 270 electoral votes. And when they make a list, whoever the nominee of, states that Governor Romney lost that they might be able to win, I don't think this state will be in the top 10, and I don't think they'll have the resources to put a state like this in play if Secretary Clinton's the Democratic nominee.
John, do you agree with that assessment? And we also, Mark's talking about Mitt Romney, we saw him make that final play for Pennsylvania, what you've sort of referred to as a Hail Mary. Will Republicans take this state more seriously in this cycle, do you think?
I can't say anything more than what Mark just said about what the last point I think is the most important one. I mean, Governor Romney, I think it was less of a Hail Mary play than a kind of attempt to do a head fake when he came here. I spent that big rally, I was at that big rally in Bucks County when he came here at the very end of the 2012 cycle. It was a very impressive rally. There were a lot of people out. It was a very cold night. And yet, I think the reality was that they did not really believe Pennsylvania was in play. It was one of the few places left in the country where they could buy media because it had not been considered a state where that was really in play. And so they had money to spend and they could spend it somewhere. So they sort of thought, why not spend it there and maybe kind of try to fake the Democrats out, of the Obama campaign out a little bit. But I don't believe that they really thought that there was a significant chance that Pennsylvania was going to fall in their direction at that point. They were misled. Their data operation was slightly less sophisticated than the Obama operation, and that's sort of, I'm understating for effect here, which is to say like the Obama campaign was working with like 400 supercomputers and the Romney campaign was working with an abacus. But even with an abacus, I think they knew that Pennsylvania was not in play for them at that point in the race, and I think that Mark's analysis is broadly right.
I'll just say one more thing. You know, structurally, it's going to be very hard for any Republican in the short term to put the state in play at the presidential level. But again, if you think about a Tom Ridge, a Dick Thornburgh, not that long ago, it just takes the right single person with the right connection to the state to be able to win here statewide as a Republican against the right Democrat. But again, right now, I don't see either the candidate. I don't see the candidate who can overcome the structural issues involving demography and resources.
And I just want to pause and remind all of you, we're going to ask you all to ask some questions at the end of our discussion here, and there are some place cards next to you where you can write your questions down, and we'll come around and then ask them. I want to turn to the debate. We just had another Republican debate this past week. John, did it change the equation in any way? There's a lot of buzz about Marco Rubio coming out of this debate. Is he now the establishment favorite, and what were your takeaways?
Well, I think Mark and I agree about this, and there's now, I think, a relatively clear top tier in the Republican Party, and that is constituted by Donald Trump and Ben Carson, who lead in most surveys in both the early states and nationally, one or the other. Marco Rubio has a huge amount of momentum on the establishment side right now. He's in sort of third place in Iowa, third place in New Hampshire, gaining donors every day. A lot of buzz around Marco Rubio, and a lot of what seems to be happening is this kind of the long-awaited coalescing of establishment support behind him. It's not total yet, but he's riding a lot of momentum in that area. And then the fourth person who's really cemented a place for himself in the race is Ted Cruz, who seems to be not only doing very well in terms of his debate performances, but has strong organizations in the early states, has a lot of money, and is doing something that no other candidate on the Republican side is doing, which is what Barack Obama did in 2008 and 2012, which is to raise money at every level. He's raising money from billionaires in his super PAC, he's raising money from millionaires and hard dollars, and then he's got a low dollar operation that is churning out low dollar donations both on the internet and elsewhere. That gives him a kind of financial viability that will allow him to, in his theory of the case, when Donald Trump and Ben Carson fall away, in his view, inevitably, he will stand to inherit a lot of that anti-establishment, what I think of as the grievance part of the party, inherit that vote. Those four guys right now are taking up a lot of space, and I think the debate did not change anything appreciably except for clarify that dynamic to a very strong degree. And then secondly, just very quickly, what this debate did also was begin the phase, I think, where we're going to now see on the Republican side something we have not yet seen, which is an actual litigation of the very deep divisions within the party on policy. That, because of the nature of the way this campaign has been fought so far, we haven't had much of that discussion. Now, the fault lines in the party on how people feel about the immigration issue, on how people feel about the tax issue, on how people feel about foreign policy and America's role in the world, those different distinctions and fissures have been there all along. But because of a lot of bright, shiny objects, the party hasn't had that discussion. It started to have it in that debate in Milwaukee, and I think it's going to have it in a very thoroughgoing way over the course of the next couple months.
And Mark, pick up on that point, because you do see this sharp divide between the Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. And could this be the cycle that the Republican Party decides to go with the more conservative candidate instead of the Mitt Romney establishment favorite?
Well, look, anybody who's paid to talk and write about politics is supposed to kind of just spew stuff out. And we've done that for most of our careers. But this cycle, you got to have humility in trying to figure out what's going to happen. Yeah. You know, the great late political philosopher Yogi Berra said, prediction is difficult, especially about the future. And this cycle, you know, underestimating Bernie Sanders, underestimating Ben Carson, overestimating Jeb Bush, there's been so many mistakes that have been made systematically. So going forward, go back to President Reagan. The Republican Party every 4 years has nominated the most electable conservative who's raised the most money. Every 4 years. Never, pattern hasn't been broken. It's the most consistent thing you'll see in the electoral politics of any party in any industrialized democracy in the world. But it could be broken this time. My head says it won't be, because I still think there's 4 establishment candidates in here, one of whom, you know, in the end has a good chance of rising up. My gut says this could be the time when it breaks. That in the big four that John referenced, Trump, Carson, Cruz, and Rubio, you've got people who, by multiple measures, don't look like the normal Republican nominee in one way or another.
For one thing.
Yeah, the hair for one thing. So it could go either way. Like I said, my head and my gut are divided on this. I do think that you can't understate the degree to which a large segment of the Republican electorate, empowered by Twitter and Facebook, empowered by a disdain for congressional Republican leaders, empowered by having lost 5 of the last 6 electoral vote totals in the presidential level, large segment of the Republican electorate is done with the establishment. It's clearly right now carrying the day. Now, I think when we get to January and February, you may see more people in Iowa and New Hampshire and Pennsylvania in the Republican process saying, you know what, electability matters, governing matters, and maybe somebody like a Christie, a Bush, a Kasich, or a Rubio are more likely to govern. Part of why Senator Rubio now is the hot candidate, besides the fact that he's a very good political performer, is he's the only one of the 7 who straddle both worlds. He's got a claim on being a new outsider, not part of the Washington problem because he's just gotten to Washington. But he also, as former Speaker of the House in Florida and as a sitting United States Senator, as someone who's fluent in policy, he straddles the two worlds, and that may be the answer to your question. Is it may end up being, if it's Rubio, you could have both. You could have somebody who's become the establishment favorite, even as a 40-year-old, which is, again, not what the party normally does, and yet very much able to tap into a change message and a reform message.
Well, let me give you two quick anecdotes that are illustrative of why the answer to your question may be that the anti-establishment populist wing of the party ends up prevailing. Mark and I have spent, and these both relate to Jeb Bush. You know, we've spent this year, we travel a lot, and we go to Iowa and New Hampshire a lot, and in the process of doing that, we've done some focus groups in Iowa and New Hampshire, both multiple focus groups in each place among Republican voters. And we probably talked to, between these groups, 50 Republicans in the kind of a formal setting of this kind. We've yet to find in any of those focus groups a single Republican who's enthusiastic about voting for Jeb Bush. And I mean, not only do we not find Bush supporters, we don't find anyone who's even could tolerate the idea of Bush as the nominee. And some of them feel it's because he's a very nice man, but we've had enough Bushes. Some of them think he'd be a really good president, but he can't become president and he'll lose a general election because of his name. Some feel he's not really a conservative. Some feel as though he doesn't seem like he wants it badly enough. But the dogs are not eating the dog food on Jeb Bush. And that is a broad problem for all establishment candidates. And the second thing I'll say is something that comes through in some polling work that we've done, and we were talking about this upstairs earlier. But when you go to this came through in some very good work that our pollster in Iowa, Ann Seltzer from the Des Moines, who does the work for the Des Moines Register and for us, she asked people has been asking people the question who they think is the most qualified to be president in the Republican side. And overwhelmingly, Iowa Republicans say they think Jeb Bush is the most qualified. And then they say that they consider that a liability rather than an asset. And the reason is because when you ask them another question, what do you think is the bigger risk? In electing someone president who does not have the traditional qualifications on one hand, or on the other hand, electing someone who will perpetuate the same thing that's been going on in Washington for the past 20 years. Overwhelmingly, Republican voters say, I'll take my chances with someone who's not qualified rather than risk the likelihood that we're just going to get more of what we've gotten for the last 2 decades. That is a new phenomenon in the Republican electorate, and it's the reason why this is a different kind of year and a different kind of cycle.
And how do you think we got to that point where they say Jeb is the most qualified, and yet they don't have the sense that they want to back him at this point?
Part of it is our fault because for about a year, people in our business told the voters that in all likelihood the nominees of the two major parties would be Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. And for an electorate that's still hungering for change, nothing says change so much like a Bush-Clinton general election. Haven't had one of those, since the 90s. And I think Donald Trump's rise has been fueled in part by that. But again, you have the long-term rise of internet, Tea Party, disdain for Congress, and a belief that things in Washington are so broken. The financial crisis stoked it as well. Seeing Washington bailing out the big banks and not helping working people, the stagnant wages, belief that programs like Social Security and health care won't be there, that there are some sort of Ponzi scheme that have ripped off working class people. And I think that when you lose the popular vote in 5 of the last 6 elections, when you have a Republican president like George Bush who presides over expensive wars and a bad economy, the brand is broken. And the people who have been the most dynamic in this presidential cycle in defining the brand in their own ways have been Donald Trump and Ben Carson. They have abject disdain for career politicians, politics as usual, Washington, the way Washington operates. And so that has brought these longer-term factors, this underlying disdain for Washington and for career politicians, has brought it to a boil because these are two, again, with their own distinct styles, two vessels for all of that coursing feeling.
This will be a good test here. Let's take a vote. Show of hands in the room right now. How many people in the room, regardless of your party affiliation, how many people in the room would think it was acceptable, that could think it was tolerable to live with Jeb Bush as your president? Put your hand in the air if you could tolerate the idea of Jeb Bush as your president. Okay, this is an overwhelmingly Democratic room. Many, many hands went up. Okay, this is why Jeb Bush is not doing well. You people are why. Because most Republican voters hate you. They hate you all, and they hate us too. The financial elite, the political elite, the media elite, anybody who constitutes part of an elite in this country is seen as being part of a corrupt system that has not benefited the average American over the course of these last 2 decades. And so when they see a bipartisan group of great and good people like y'all put your hands up and say, yeah, Jeb Bush would be great, that's one reason. That's enough to know that they don't want that man in the White House.
Let me ask you another question. Ask you to vote again. Show of hands if you're uncomfortable voting for the other in front of the others. Close your eyes as you vote. Raise your hand if you'd be totally comfortable with Donald Trump as president. Raise your hand. Okay, I see one there. All right. So
I saw two.
You saw two. So congratulations, by the standards of most Philadelphia organizations. You're a very diverse group.
And we could get security for that person to get you out later if you need help.
So Trump and Carson, when I get to Des Moines tonight, if I ask the same question, any room I'm in Des Moines, you get a different answer, particularly obviously amongst Republicans, but even Democrats.
Let me jump in on the Trump question, because when you talk about predictions, no one has defied your predictions, everyone's predictions, more than Donald Trump. He has come out again, I think, and raised some eyebrows with this comment that he wants a deportation force. He said it yesterday on Morning Joe. You were talking about it this morning on Morning Joe. Just to remind everyone, President Obama won the Latino vote by 71% in 2012. Mitt Romney won 27%. This was one of the significant factors that helped President Obama win the White House again. Is this the moment that derails Donald Trump? And has some of the damage already been done, which, as you know in your conversations with RNC officials, that's their big concern, that they're alienating this key voting group?
Well, look, Mark talked before about the coalition of the ascendant, and there's no more important part of the coalition of the ascendant in terms of just numerically fastest growing part of the American electorate is the Hispanic vote. And it's now the case that, you can play with the numbers in various ways, but you got to win in the mid-30s of the Hispanic vote to win a popular vote majority in America now. As you pointed out, Mitt Romney, well below 30. John McCain was below 30, and John McCain was relatively good on immigration and other issues that dealt with Hispanic Americans. It is hard to imagine that Donald Trump is going to outperform John McCain with the Hispanic vote if he were the Republican nominee. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with one of the Republican presidential candidates. I won't tell you who it is, but I sat down with him. I saw him at a bar in New York City, and he said he asked me how I thought the nomination fight for his party was going, and I said, Senator, I said, I want to hear what you have to say. He said, John, we had a post-mortem in our party after 2012, and the most important thing we said we had to do was to get right with Hispanics. And now we got one guy in our party who says that they're all rapists. He's the leading candidate. We got another candidate who says we got to build a wall between the United States and Canada. And we got another one who says we got to put a chip in the neck of all the Hispanics and track them like FedEx packages. He said, my party is, and he used this word that everyone who's been to an Eagles game knows, starts with an F and a U. That is basically, I think, this is a candidate.
Got to admit, it's uncanny Rick Santorum impression.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's got a second career.
This is a candidate who is in favor of comprehensive immigration reform and wants a path to legal status or a path to citizenship for the undocumented workers who are here in this country, who, like many establishmentarians, looks at what has happened already in this race and seeing the center of gravity of the party pulled in exactly the wrong direction. Marco Rubio now is a guy who was a champion of comprehensive immigration reform when he arrived in the Senate, is now on television today talking about we're going to need to deport a bunch of people. The Clinton campaign really likes the sound of that, I will tell you.
To what extent is the Clinton campaign celebrating this and getting ready to obviously capitalize on it in the general?
I'm surprised, given the course of the Republican nomination fight, that the people at her campaign in Brooklyn can even concentrate with all the celebrating they do every day about their good fortune. She's a vulnerable candidate in some ways, although, again, any Democrat's going to have a structural advantage in the Electoral College and the demographics. But, the party is not in control of the rhetoric, particularly on immigration, but also on some other issues related to health care, related to gay and lesbian rights, an issue which has flipped politically dramatically, related to reproductive rights, as I mentioned before, and a failure, despite an emerging debate on economics, to really define what it means to be a Republican presidential nominee with an economic agenda for the working class and the middle class. So I think the damage, there is damage being done. As I said at the beginning, they've done nothing, I think, to go very forward, but there's still time. She's a vulnerable candidate, and finding a Republican nominee who can fix the damage is like, you know, if you're a single person in Philadelphia finding someone to marry or finding a parking space in Manhattan, you just need one. You don't have to, you know, one can really change things. And so I think that today, Republicans are in danger of having a nomination fight that goes all the way to the convention or into the spring. Hillary Clinton could be the Democratic nominee the night of the de facto nominee the night of the New Hampshire primary. And so there's a danger. Now, a long fight, more often than not, produces a weaker nominee. Spend down all their money, lots of negative advertising, no ability to plan for the general election. Barack Obama is one exception. So it is possible that all the things we see now as the damaging rhetoric and damaging fights, particularly over immigration, but not only, that all of that could be undone relatively easily if the Republicans nominate someone who is seen as better on television, perhaps even more likable than Secretary Clinton, if you can imagine such a thing, in a way that is not revolutionary, but enough to win a general election.
And we have some audience questions now, and I know that we're pressed for time, so if you both want to answer, great, or if you just want to do one answer. If you were to write about this election now as if it were December 2016, what would you say each party did right to win the votes? John, do you want to take a stab at that?
Wow, just requires a degree of forecasting that I'm having a hard time with in the absence of my crystal ball. I forgot to bring that with me. Look, well, I think we've been talking about it a little bit on the Republican side.
Yeah.
Look, we both agree that Hillary Clinton, for the reasons that we've just been describing, is not in any way guaranteed to be the next president of the United States. But if you had to bet the mortgage money tomorrow, she's the most likely next president of the United States, for the reasons Mark has laid out, we've talked about already here. Having the parties do not have, as anybody who actually lives or works in politics now knows, the parties have less power than they've ever had. There's no, the parties are relatively weak. Our politics have been largely privatized. So it's not really so much what the parties have done, it's what the individuals within them. Hillary Clinton, if she is the next president, a huge part of why she will be the next president will have been the fact that for whatever set of reasons she was able to project such strength that she did not draw more formidable challengers, and that she could run as a quasi-incumbent on the Democratic side. Bernie Sanders' strength, which is real, notwithstanding. The Republican side, I think, you know, there was all of the things we've been talking about here. If the Republicans do lose, it will be for having failed in a long-term way to have appropriately identified the nature of the challenges at the end of 2012 that they needed to address, and then having done nothing to address them, or in fact exacerbating the problems in the ways that we've already talked about.
And Mark, that is a great jumping off point for this next question from an audience member. What will be the most defining policy issue of this campaign, do you think?
Of the general election?
Let's say of the general election.
A vision of creating an economy where working class people and middle class people can easily see a future where their kids have a better chance and do better than they did.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, wages and mobility. I mean, I think that the economy is almost always, and again, in the absence of another significant, huge terrorist event on domestic soil or an actual ground war that we're involved in where foreign policy overshadows everything, economics always takes center stage. And I think the central issue in our economics now is not, as some people think, income inequality per se, but is wage stagnation and mobility, in the sense that, that for the vast majority of Americans, people are working harder and not getting ahead, and that gives them a profound sense of pessimism about the future ahead for their children.
And this one, a little bit off the topic of the election, but this is a great question. How will Speaker Ryan govern, and will anything get done before the presidential election? They're obviously looking at some significant things, and then you obviously have to think about TPP, the big trade deal. What do you anticipate, Mark?
He'll govern in a way that tries to lead with not tactics and strategy, but a vision on policy. And I think that's good for the party. I think it's good for the party's presidential prospects, and I think it's good for the country. He's a policy guy now in a very political job, but he is also very disciplined, and I think he will try to put forward some ideas on tax reform, deficit reduction, entitlement reform, education, health care, that help the party's presidential nominee frame the discussion. I think that'll be really healthy. I'm not super optimistic that much will get done. Maybe some things on transportation, budget, maybe some things on health care, maybe. But I would imagine that every day we're closer to January 2017 is a day closer to Republicans imagining a world in which they control the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they could get pretty close to a full loaf, and maybe if they ram things through, a full loaf on the big issues they care about. If they make deals now, they're going to be of significance. They're going to be giving the president probably at least 70% of what he wants.
Paul Ryan and John Boehner are really different people,
Yep.
but the guy who had the job before had dreamed of having that job his entire life. He got that job, and within a few short years, he quit while singing Zippity Doo-Dah. He was so happy to be getting rid of the job that he had dreamed of his whole life. The things that made that job so crappy for John Boehner are still there. And Paul Ryan is really different from John Boehner, but the forces he has to contend with have not changed at all.
He may be
better. I think he's set a different tone. He may be better equipped to deal with those challenges because some members of the conservative wing of the party think of him as being more of their own, one of their own, in a way that they never trusted John Boehner. But again, it is a fractious, disruptive, difficult to manage caucus on the House Republican caucus is, and as I say, it will strain. Paul Ryan has incredible strengths, intellectual and political strengths, but all of them will be put to the test in terms of trying to deal with the dynamics that made John Boehner throw in the towel.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Last question for both of you. There's obviously a Democratic debate this weekend. I will be there. I think you guys will both be there. What are you looking for, and do you think that Bernie Sanders is going to be more aggressive, go on the attack on Saturday in a way that we have not yet seen, and does he need to do that?
You know, there's obviously a huge media focus on this question of whether Senator Sanders will attack in some way. I think if you look at his issue positions, they're more in line with the base of the party than some of Secretary Clinton's positions. So I think rather than attack, he needs to do three things to increase his chances. One is to talk about those issues, contrasts in a way that makes the differences clear, not personality, not personal attacks, but differences on issues. Second is he has to restore what he had just a couple weeks ago, which is a sense that he can win. He has to come off as someone who could be a plausible nominee, because in the end, a lot of Iowa Republicans and New Hampshire Democrats in Iowa and New Hampshire will want to vote for a winner. Democrats are afraid of losing the White House because then they would have no control of either of those two branches. And lastly, I think he has to come across as a little bit more of a person. It's still a struggle for him to talk about real people who he's met on the campaign trail, experiences in his life that are portrayed in a new television ad he's got on that's quite effective. But he's got to connect this to more than just abstractions about a revolution, but about the real lives of real people with some concrete examples. I think those things would be more effective than some sort of attack against her, as much as the press seems to want that.
John, what does he need to do to get his traction back?
After the first Democratic debate, Karl Rove described that debate on Fox News as being Hillary Clinton, Bilbo Baggins, and 3 midgets. I thought that was a pretty good description. 2 of the midgets are gone now, so we have to think about the Bilbo Baggins strategy. I think the first thing he really needs to do, and he should be doing it now, and we'll know on Saturday whether he's done it or not, is he actually has to spend a little time preparing. The last debate, he was woefully underprepared. His chief strategist, Tad Devine, said to me afterwards that they had done, for his first presidential debate, the first time he's ever done this after Hillary Clinton did it 25 times in 2008, for his first presidential debate, nomination debate experience, he put in 15 hours of debate prep. And Tad Devine said we needed like 1,500 to get him ready. And his lack of preparation really showed on the stage that night. I know his people are trying very hard to make him prepare more for this debate than they did the last one. I'm not sure he's a totally willing accomplice in that endeavor. But I think Mark is right in the sense that the difficulty for Bernie Sanders is that Hillary Clinton is really popular with Democrats. Bernie Sanders is really popular with Democrats. It's hard to go negative on someone within your party who is really broadly popular, who has an 80% approval rating within the party. But drawing clear contrasts on issues, which Senator Sanders has indicated he wants to do, where there are issues, and there are issues that are not only places where they have differences on the substance, but places where he has set the pace, where she has moved in his direction. I think his ability to point those things out and try to make as clear as possible the extent to which he's been a consistent, principled progressive, I think that's the right strategy for him. Also, a little humor, a little humanity, not talking a little bit about like who he is as a human being would do him an awful lot of good too.
Fantastic. Great conversation. Thanks to both of you. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I would say, despite the fact that John left his crystal ball somewhere else, we leave lunch a lot smarter and with a lot greater insights. And thanks to you, Kristen and John and Mark, for your terrific presence with us here today. Thanks to all of you. We look forward to a terrific year ahead, and we look forward to working with you in that. So thanks for being here.